Hello and good evening. My name is Don Arnold and welcome to our main edition of World News Tonight here on TVP World. Ukrainian troops have attacked a new section of the Russian border, according to a Reuters report. Meanwhile, Russia continues to carry out aerial attacks targeting civilians, setting air raid alerts across the country. Explosions are reported in several cities, and many people are still missing under the rubble. That and more coming right up, but first off, let's take a look at tonight's headlines. The IDF says it's rescued a 52-year-old hostage who was held by Hamas since October 7th in a complex rescue operation in southern Gaza. A UN committee has found that Poland's restrictive abortion law violates women's rights. And Polish goalkeeper Wojciech Szczęsny has announced his retirement from professional football. Several people were killed in a Russian drone attack late last night in several cities across Ukraine. This was yet another deadly night in a row. Yesterday, Poland reported violations of its airspace after an object crossed the border from Ukrainian territory.
Sabotage, Kryvyi Rih. These were the cities that were hit the hardest in last night's Russian drone attack.
The most important thing is that everyone is alive. There is so much damage that you can see. Our house is completely destroyed. Everything is gone, but my wife and I are safe.
Not everyone was this fortunate. 2 people were killed overnight in a hotel in Kryvyi Rih, which was likely hit by a Shahed drone. 5 others were injured.
I would like to express my condolences to those who died, to all their families. I would like to wish recovery to all those in hospitals.
Last night was the second deadly night in a row, as 6 people were killed in Russian strikes the night before.
One could say that these drone and missile attacks overnight against Ukraine are a response to Kursk, but frankly, these are the sort of drone and missile attacks that the Russian Federation has thrown at Ukraine time and time again, targeting energy infrastructure, targeting civilian infrastructure.
One of the drones launched by Russia is believed to have entered Polish airspace in the early hours of Monday.
At 6:43 local time, the object entered Polish airspace near the Ukrainian city of Czerwonograd, where a nearby power plant has been repeatedly targeted by Russia. The object likely violated Polish airspace and then disappeared from our screens after covering around 25 kilometers.
Poland scrambled its fighter jets in response to the incident. NATO has also responded.
While we have no information indicating an intentional attack by Russia against allies, these acts are irresponsible and potentially dangerous.
We've seen the lack of accuracy that these weapon systems have. And of course, they've landed in Poland, they've landed in Romania, and of course, this latest incursion through Polish airspace this week.
A search operation is being carried out in Tyszowce, where the object disappeared from radars. This is not the first violation of Poland's airspace in recent days. Last week, parts of 2 Russian weather balloons were found in Poland's northeast.
Ukraine is continuing its offensive within Russia. Meanwhile, the Russians themselves, however, are threatening the strategically located city of Pokrovsk in Ukraine. We now go live to our correspondent in Kyiv, Oz Chatterjee. Good evening, Oz. What's the situation there on the front?
Good evening. Well, today we heard update on the situation in Kursk and Pokrovsk by the Commander-in-Chief, General Syrsky, and by President Zelensky, who was appearing at the Ukraine Independence 2024 forum here in Kyiv. Now, speaking first, Syrsky was talking about Ukraine expanding the operation. They've now reached 1,294 square kilometers of Russian territory in Kursk that they are controlling and occupying. And that's over 100 settlements, at least, that Ukraine has now fully captured, according to General Syrsky. He also updated on the situation with prisoners of war, which they're being called here in Kyiv the exchange fund, because they're being used for prisoner transfers. They say Ukraine has captured 594 Russian POWs in its incursion in Kursk. Now, speaking today to reporters at the Ukraine forum, Zelensky spoke about the operation in Kursk and how it was impacting the situation in Donetsk, with Zelensky claiming that the Russian advances in the Pokrovsk region of Donetsk have slowed down since the invasion of Russia began, the incursion into Kursk began. Not that it stopped or that it's been thwarted, but that the advances are still ongoing, but they have slowed down since the raid began. Now, Syrskyi elaborated more on this, saying that Russia has pulled 30,000 troops, redeployed them from areas around Ukraine. However, they are still intensifying their attacks in Pokrovsk. Now, it should be noted that Pokrovsk is an incredibly important place for the Ukrainians to hold. It contains several key rail lines, and it's used as a vital place to equip, to arm, and to rearm the troops that they're using to defend those areas in Donetsk. So it's going to be a very, very difficult loss for Ukraine if they do eventually lose Pokrovsk.
Well, let's certainly hope that that doesn't happen. Oz Chatterjee there in Kyiv, thank you very much for your report. Israeli commandos rescued one of the hostages taken captive by Hamas on October 7th last year. Today's rescue leaves 108 hostages in Hamas captivity. The fate of many of them remains unknown.
Farhan Al-Qadi waited 326 days for this moment, and so has his family.
Can't express my feelings. I hope my mother will be happier than us. We prayed for him. My mother prayed for him more. Her prayer reached the sky.
The operation to liberate Farhan from Hamas captivity was not an easy one.
Israeli commandos rescued Qaid Farhan Al-Qadi from an underground tunnel following accurate intelligence.
He was taken hostage in Kibbutz Magen, one of several communities located around the Gaza Strip that were attacked by Hamas terrorists on October 7th.
Welcome home, Farhan Al-Qadi. I commend the IDF and the ISA for another successful rescue operation. We're working relentlessly to return all our hostages.
Out of 108 hostages who have not been returned to Israel, around one-third is known to have died. The fate of the rest is unknown.
And now there's a number of political scandals in Poland when it comes to the conservative opposition. The former Deputy Minister of Justice was charged today due to his involvement with the Pegasus spyware. And the president of the Strategic Reserves Agency is also wanted by police and may have even fled the country. There's a lot to unpack in this next report.
Donald Tusk's government is continuing its policy of holding the previous administration accountable for their alleged malpractices. But the politicians from the United Poland conservative camp have no intention of playing ball, even if they claim to be cooperative.
The prosecutors inside the building behind me were elected illegally. I only intended to tell them that they have no right to prosecute or lay charges against anyone.
Michał Woś, the former Deputy Justice Minister, was summoned by the national prosecution on Tuesday. It was his decision to purchase the infamous Pegasus spyware, using almost €6 million from the Justice Fund, a pool of money intended for victims of crimes. Members of the conservative opposition are outraged by these investigations.
It's a political witch hunt, nothing else. The current government wants to be able to commit crimes with impunity, just like they did before 2015.
Officials from the previous administration claim the Pegasus spyware was used only to counter Russian influence. But prominent members of the opposition had also reportedly been targeted by the program.
Mr. Woś says he bought the Pegasus system to target terrorists. Me and Krzysztof Brejza must have been terrorists then. This spyware was purchased in order to target opposition members who were against the purchasing of properties by Russian companies.
Apart from the Pegasus scandal, the Polish public opinion has also been shocked by a police warrant being issued for the former president of the Public Reserves Agency. Michał Kuczmierowski is wanted for the mishandling of public funds and participation in an organized crime group.
Mr. Kuchmierowski should appear in front of the public prosecutor as soon as possible. If he is getting that much praise from the Law and Justice Party and former Prime Minister Morawiecki, then he shouldn't have a problem with explaining to the prosecution how he acted in accordance with the law.
According to Prime Minister Donald Tusk, overall, the previous administration may have embezzled more than 100 billion zloty, which is around 20 billion euro. What's more, due to several irregularities, the Polish Electoral Committee postponed granting subsidies for the Law and Justice Party. The committee will announce whether the main opposition group receives its funding or not on August 29th. While the investigations are still ongoing, it is important to mention that there have been no convictions so far. More than a dozen people have heard charges, but according to the current administration, more are still to come. From Warsaw, TVP World, Kazimierz Łyszak.
A United Nations committee has released a statement saying that Poland's near-total abortion ban puts the health and lives of Polish women at risk, inflicting on them both mental and physical suffering.
The UN Committee on the Elimination of Discrimination Against Women deemed the Poland-wide restrictive abortion laws a gender-based violation against women. Poland has one of the strictest abortion laws in the EU, second only to Malta. In October 2020, a Polish top court consisting mainly of judges appointed by the former Law and Justice Party excluded fetus defects as a valid premise for abortion, de facto outlawing pregnancy termination except in certain extreme cases. The ruling is widely considered to have contributed to the Law and Justice election defeat, but notwithstanding, hasn't been overturned since.
A lot of women were probably very optimistic about the new government coming into rule now, and that we don't have these promises delivered. It's just very disappointing because we see that our rights are not a priority for them.
Because of the abortion law, Polish women tend to seek help abroad or online.
Most women who want to have an abortion right now, they do not travel. They just order medications from organizations like Women Help Women, international organizations.
Back in 2021, a woman died from septic shock after doctors refused to terminate her doomed pregnancy, afraid of potential legal repercussions. This sparked nationwide protests, with some 100,000 people taking to the streets of Warsaw at the height of the pandemic. Although less numerous, the protests still continue.
We and other organizations and thousands of people on the streets over the last years have been calling the government to change the law, to make necessary changes in the criminal code, to make the necessary changes in terms of access to healthcare.
But despite a new government, not much has changed. Last month, the Polish parliament surprisingly rejected a bill to decriminalize abortion in the country, although Prime Minister Donald Tusk had pledged to loosen abortion laws in the lead-up to the 2023 parliamentary election.
There is no majority in the Polish parliament in favor of such a right to legal abortion as we have discussed here and agreed with you, among others. There is simply no majority.
The ruling coalition doesn't seem to be unanimous about laxer pregnancy termination laws. As one of the junior coalition partners, the Polish People's Party holds a firm stance against any changes. Many activists fear the near-total abortion ban won't be lifted until the next general election, to be held in 2027. Meanwhile, 62% of Poles are in favor of legalizing abortion until the 12th week of pregnancy.
Tomorrow, the Polish government will announce the draft of next year's budget. The stakes couldn't be higher given the swelling deficit and several new expenses.
This is the Polish Ministry of Finance, and the man in charge of this place has a lot on his plate. The biggest headache for him is, of course, the budget. That's because of the deficit, which inflated like a balloon. This year alone, the finance minister has to borrow around 43 billion euro. That's a problem, because high interest rates are driving up the costs of servicing Poland's debt and are squeezing the budget even tighter. Next year, they'll amount to around 25 billion euro. The picture would be much more pleasant if not for the fact that tax collection in Poland feels like searching for a needle in a haystack.
We see some problems in VAT collection, so the VAT gap is visible or again.
This means that the government may need to unexpectedly borrow even more, especially since new expenses are on the horizon. These include a pension for widows and changes to health insurance.
Always a question how those expenses will be financed, and of course taxes here are at the very first place.
On top of this, the finance minister will also have to keep the European Commission in mind, as it has launched an excessive deficit procedure against Poland and 6 other countries. In short, the 2025 budget will be full of challenges.
Security analysts are warning that Russian interference and sabotage operations will only likely increase as relations between Moscow and the West worsen. This comes as reports claim a Russian sabotage threat was behind an alert last week at a German NATO base.
On high alert, the NATO airbase in the German town of Gilienkirchen last Friday. It's been reported that a foreign intelligence agency provided serious indication of preparatory actions for a likely Russian act of sabotage against the NATO facility, possibly involving the use of drones. Security analysts say, if true, it represents an escalation by Moscow.
Well, I think that shows a significant escalation in Russian tactics against the West, because this is really an operation conducted at the NATO territory. So it suggests that we are in a different stage now, that this is not just about Ukraine, it's about targeting NATO itself, and as such, it demands an equivalent response, really.
The base helps NATO monitor developments within Ukraine. That enhances Kyiv's military response. A fortnight ago, the base and one near Cologne were suspected to have been the targets of an operation to sabotage water supplies. It comes after US intelligence discovered earlier this year that Russia planned to assassinate Armin Papiga, the chief executive of a German arms manufacturer. NATO agreed in Washington that hybrid threat operations would be considered a possible attack on alliance territory.
We have a principle out there which is saying if Russians are doing it, we can consider it an attack on NATO territory. So, but we need to, from a principle, we need to go into the planning stage, and from planning stage, we need to go into the execution. So for now, we have agreed that this is serious.
While a response is developed, Western intelligence agencies remain alert to Russian hybrid attacks.
The presidents of all 3 Baltic states descended on Moldova today to celebrate the nation's Independence Day in a show of solidarity. Our reporter Sasha Feuerbach was there for the celebrations in the capital, Chisinau, to bring you the full story.
Today, Moldova celebrates 33 years of independence, a milestone marked also by the nation's recent start of its EU accession process. The occasion is even more significant with the visit of all 3 Baltic presidents, Estonia, Latvia and Lithuania, to Chisinau. Together with Prime Minister Zoran Rechan, they signed a joint declaration affirming their support for Moldova's EU ambitions. This show of unity comes ahead of the crucial October 20th elections, where Moldovans will vote not only for their next president, but also in a referendum on EU membership. Now, despite the optimism, Moldova faces serious challenges. It remains one of Europe's poorest nations, grappling with inflation, corruption, and its proximity to conflict-ridden Ukraine. There are also concerns about the influence of Moscow, especially regarding the breakaway region of Transnistria and the autonomous region of Gagauzia. At a press conference, I asked Prime Minister Rechan about his government's response to Kremlin interference, which has been a growing concern since Russia's invasion of Ukraine.
Moldova has been facing this challenge from Kremlin for quite a few years. After the Russian aggression in Ukraine, in Moldova we have peace and security thanks to the courage of the Ukrainians and the support the West has been providing to Ukraine. At the same time, we are exposed to this hybrid war. However, the Republic of Moldova, its institutions have learned to cope with these challenges.
Since Putin invaded Ukraine, fears have grown in Chisinau and across Europe that Vladimir Putin might target Moldova next. Now, President Rinkiewicz of Latvia didn't hold back in expressing his country's strong stance against Russia.
History has shown that where there is Russia, there is conflict and war. Where there is EU, there is peace and prosperity.
Despite the challenges, Moldova's pro-European spirit shines bright on its 33rd Independence Day. Citizens are hopeful for prosperity and peace, and the presence of the Baltic presidents underscores Europe's unity. Sasha Farbach for TVP World in Chisinau, Moldova.
One of Poland's most famous footballers, Wojciech Szczęsny, announced his retirement today. Let's take a look at his career over the years.
Wojciech Szczęsny announced his retirement in a touching post on the social media platform Instagram.
I didn't just realize my dreams. I've arrived where my imagination wouldn't even dare to take me. I gave the game 18 years of my life, every day without excuses. Today, although my body still feels ready for challenges, my heart is not there anymore. I feel that right now it is time to give all of my attention to my family, my amazing wife Marina, and our two beautiful children, Liam and Noelia.
Szczęsny played for Arsenal, AS Roma and Juventus. He is a three-time Italian First Division champion and has also won the FA Cup twice, as well as the Italian Super Cup.
We're going to remember Szczęsny as a goalkeeper who saved the penalties of Leo Messi, bring us to last Euros in Germany because of the penalties in Cardiff against Wales, which we won because of him. That's the way I would say many of us remember Szczęsny.
Szczęsny will no doubt be missed by his fans, both in Poland and abroad.
The United Nations Committee on the Elimination of Discrimination Against Women held that Poland's highly restrictive abortion law is inflicting serious harm on women, giving rise to grave systemic violations of their human rights. In order to rectify the situation, the committee recommends that Poland legalize and fully decriminalize abortion, recognizing abortion as a fundamental right and placing women's autonomy at the center of its policy. Although this was a key election issue which gave the governing coalition many votes in the last election, lawmakers are unable to follow through on their promise and are facing a bit of backlash from the electorate. Now joining me here to discuss this issue is Associate Professor at the Law and Administration Department of the University of Warsaw, Jolanta Jakubik-Lalik. Hello, and thank you for joining me tonight on World News Tonight.
Thank you for having me.
Yes, now this is, again, a complicated issue, one that has legal ramifications, but also has political ramifications. So let's start with the politics. Jan Grabiec, the Prime Minister's Chief of Staff, has said that the changes to the abortion law will not be possible until after the presidential election or the next parliamentary elections. At the same time, Prime Minister Donald Tusk said that there is simply not enough MPs that share the same opinion on the issue as do the members of the Civic Coalition, so that can't be changed. So where does this leave us? Where does this leave the electorate who this exact issue is so important to during the last elections?
Indeed, there is a problem for the governing coalition. They don't seem to have enough votes to pass the law in the parliament, especially having in mind that one of the coalition partners, the conservative Polish Peasants' Party, they are not willing to support even very modest modifications of the abortion law. But even if they did, even if the voting was in favor of modification of the abortion law, still the president is not willing to sign any kind of act that would make the access to abortion easier. So unfortunately, I share the opinion that it will be very, very challenging to change the abortion law in the coming months.
Now, are there some other legal issues from a legal standpoint, even if a bill was passed reverting the reforms to the abortion law, the Constitutional Tribunal's ruling still stands, it still stands in the way, does it not? I mean, do you agree with that assessment?
Well, the problem with the Constitutional Court, the Constitutional Tribunal, is that the majority of the judges are appointed by the previous government, by Law and Justice Party, which means also that they are not legally appointed per se. So some of the judges, they should not really perform their functions. Having in mind that, also in 2020, this Constitutional Tribunal changed the interpretation of the abortion law by removing one of the possibilities for abortion. So currently the law with removing one of the possibilities is extremely strict. And this is also what causes a lot of concern, not only in Poland, but also outside of the country. And this is also why people, especially women, are very angry at the government that they are not capable of changing the situation.
Right, but it's also very difficult. So even if they were to pass the law, even if that was to pass through Parliament, they would still face legal hurdles within the Constitutional Tribunal, correct?
Yes, correct.
Okay. All right, so back to the political process. How to convince PSL to liberalize the abortion law? What elements do you think would be acceptable and which ones for them are non-negotiable?
The problem is that the liberalization of the interpretation of the law, which was supposed to be passed in July, was not passed, even though that it was extremely modest. So it was the most modest attempt to really change the law. And even this modest attempt was not met with understanding and agreement from the PSL party. So currently either they will change their mind, they will change their opinion, and they will vote in favor of the liberalization, but it will be very difficult now to justify also because they were very strict in explaining why they were against this modest
Does that have to do with the abortion on demand until 12 weeks? That wasn't allowed, to the best of my knowledge, it wasn't allowed to the last.
That was not even voted. Yeah. That was not even voted. What was voted on was only to decriminalize the attempt to assist a woman who was undergoing abortion until the 12th week of pregnancy. So it was not the issue of abortion on demand, as it is called by some of the circles, but it was only to decriminalize the assistance to abortion for women who are seeking
in
abortion.
The case of a threat to their lives, of an irreversible damaged fetus, is this correct?
These are the legal provisions that still allow the abortion in Poland. However, let's be also clear that there is a freezing effect, especially after the judgment of the Constitutional Tribunal in 2020. So currently, even if there is a threat to the women's life and health, the doctors are sometimes not really willing to perform abortion. And that is the challenge. And several women already died in Poland because of that, because they couldn't get the help when they were pregnant and their life was threatened.
And this is at the heart of the UN Committees on the Elimination of Discrimination Against Women and their accusations against Poland, correct?
Exactly.
Yeah.
Because, I mean, the situation is threatening the human rights of Polish citizens. So this should be a concern also for the international organizations that Poland is a member of.
With PSL being in opposition to passing this bill that was put forward in front of the Polish Parliament, why do you think it is that particular provision? Why are they against this? It seems like common sense.
It seems like common sense. However, I think that PSL chose to, let's say, try to explain to their most conservative electorate that they are also very conservative and very committed to these conservative values. Also, I think that the leader of the party is trying to attract this conservative electorate from the PiS, from the Law and Justice Party, because some of the people are also disappointed, let's say, by some of the actions of the party, and also some breaches of the law, which seems to be quite obvious currently. So I think that what the PSL party is now trying to do is to gather their conservative electorate to convince the voters to vote in favor of them. However, I don't think that the strategy is really working, because when we look at the opinion polls, currently the PSL party is below 2% of the popular support.
And we've already passed through an election. correct? I mean, they're already elected, yeah.
True. However, if, for example, the new elections will be happening soon, and we don't know if they are not happening or happening, that could be a challenge for the PSL. So I'm not sure that the strategy that is adopted by PSL is really working in their favor.
Okay, well, with that, we've run out of time. I'd like to thank you very much for joining us. Jovanka Jakubik-Lalik, University of Warsaw, of course, Associate Professor at the Law Department there. Thank you for joining us.
Thank you.
And that concludes this edition of World News Tonight. Thank you all for watching, and stay with us for more here on TVP World.